This conference will now be recorded.
So welcome. It's Friday, August 14th, 2020. And today's webinar topic we're going to explore is 5 reasons you need to create a special needs trust for a beneficiary with a disability. Now, have you ever found yourself being concerned about somebody in the family? It could be a young child, could be a young adult, or perhaps an older adult, and you're concerned about their ability to handle money. Perhaps they have a disability that affects their intellectual capacity. Maybe you're concerned that if you sent them to the supermarket with a list and a certain amount of cash, that they might return home but not have the right amount of change, or they may not know if they've purchased everything on the list that you sent them with. Or have you ever found yourself concerned that your loved one's future needs might not be met by government benefits because the amount of cash assistance they're receiving is very limited? Have you ever found yourself wondering whether or not you should disinherit your loved one and give the money to another child to hold for them out of concern that their special needs or their disability might prevent them from continuing to qualify for government assistance, or they just may not be able to manage the money properly? Well, if you've had these thoughts, we do need to think about unanticipated, unforeseen events that we would hope would never happen, but could. So if we disinherit our loved one and we give that money to another adult child to hold, what happens if that adult child were to get divorced? Well, unfortunately, the answer to the question is the inheritance is now going to need to be reported in the divorce proceeding, and some of it, possibly half of it, could be given to the divorcing spouse, which means that money won't be available to meet the needs of your special needs beneficiary. And what happens if the other child uses the money all for themselves because there's really no legal obligation? There's no legal parameters to protect your special needs beneficiary. So if you've had any of these thoughts, any of these concerns, then you're in the right place today, because we're going to talk about 5 reasons to create a special needs trust. We're going to explore the different kinds of special needs trusts and their various benefits. And we're going to talk about what you can do to help you prepare to put a special needs trust in place for the people you love. So the top number 1 reason to create a special needs trust is so that your beneficiary avoids losing their government benefits when they come into the inheritance. Programs like Medicaid, supplemental security income, and food stamps are all financially sensitive. This means that the individual must have low income and low assets in order to qualify. For example, Medicaid and SSI both have a resource limit of $2,000, and they also share a similar income limit, which for the rest of this year is $783 a month. So receiving an inheritance is going to cause the beneficiary to have too many resources and too much income, and so they can technically lose their benefits at least for a short period of time until they've either spent down the inheritance or they've then had to do some emergency planning, so those monies are no longer putting them over the limits. The second good reason to create a special needs trust for a beneficiary who has a disability is a practical reason. It's that we need to create a management system, a management plan, so that the inheritance can be effectively invested and last as long as possible. We want to eliminate the possibility that our beneficiary is going to overspend or might be taken advantage by somebody who's unscrupulous and is only trying to get the money for themselves. Somebody who might befriend your beneficiary and basically financially exploit them. So we don't want that to happen. We need a management system that has checks and balances and put somebody who is trustworthy and fiscally responsible in charge of managing the inheritance. The third reason to create a special needs trust is we want to leverage what the government benefits provide and maximize what the inheritance can purchase and add to your beneficiary's life. Now, programs like Medicaid have limits, meaning that they might authorize physical therapy or occupational therapy treatments a certain amount per month, but they don't go beyond those limits. So if your beneficiary would really benefit from more sessions a month, that's where we would use the monies in the special needs trust to supplement, but we still want Medicaid to pay its basic benefits. So we want to leverage, we want to get the best and the most out of what the government will provide, and then we want to supplement it with the inheritance. One thing to keep in mind is that what Medicaid pays providers, whether they're a physician, a therapist, a facility, a hospital, is usually a reduced negotiated rate compared to what you might see advertised as a private rate. So we want to leverage these government benefits because when it comes to paying privately for services and care, that's going to be at a higher rate than what Medicaid pays. The fourth, and probably one of the most important of the 5 reasons we want to create a special needs trust, is to enable the beneficiary to have quality of life. And we're going to talk in a little while about what is quality of life because it really has a different definition for every individual. And last but not least, reason number 5 is we want to enable the beneficiary to have quality of care, where perhaps they might be able to choose where they live to receive the care that they need. So let's start by talking a little bit more about government assistance and how an inheritance can impact that beneficiary. So a few minutes ago, we talked about that certain programs are financially sensitive, and this includes subsidized housing, what is sometimes referred to as Section 8 or HUD housing. It actually has an income limit similar to Medicaid, SSI, and food stamps. And when a person qualifies for these benefit programs, one of the forms that they sign says that they have an obligation to notify the government agency within 10 days when there is a change in their financial circumstance. So a change in financial circumstance can include an increase in their income, maybe because they're working, or it could be a cost of living adjustment. It could mean that now they have a job and they're earning money. And it could also mean that they either received an inheritance or perhaps they were injured, filed a lawsuit, and now there is a settlement from that lawsuit. So if any of those changes in financial circumstances occur, that person or somebody who can legally act for them is responsible for notifying the government agency. Now, in turn, what's going to happen is the agency is going to ask for documentation. They're going to see if the person still has the money in their names or has it been spent down. And from there, they'll determine whether the person continues to qualify for the program or if they're going to terminate services. So timing is so important here. And you know, when we have the opportunity on a Monday morning to look at how a coach called certain plays at a football game on Sunday afternoon, they say hindsight is 20/20. We have more wisdom the day after than when the game was being played. So do keep in mind that timing is crucial, and it's even more important that we get these special needs trusts in place at the earliest possible time. So there are two types of special needs trust that we're going to talk about today. The first kind of special needs trust is one that is created by a person other than the trust beneficiary. For example, it could be created by a parent, a grandparent, another relative in the family. What is the key here is that the person creating the trust does not have a legal obligation of support. So when does this happen? Well, for parents in Florida, we set the age of 18 as the time when our children become legal adults. So at that moment, we are no longer legally obligated to provide for their basic needs, things such as education, food, and shelter. So if we have a child with a disability, once they turn 18, we have the ability to create for them a special needs trust. Or a grandparent does not have any direct legal obligation, nor do cousins, aunts, and uncles, so they can create a special needs trust at any time. What is key about this is when the trust is created by somebody other than the beneficiary, it means that there will be no payback to the Medicaid agency when the beneficiary passes away. So you get to choose who you would like the assets to go to, should any assets be left in the special needs trust after your loved one passes away. It's not going to go to Social Security, and it's not going to go to Medicaid. So you can choose perhaps to leave it to another child. You can choose to leave it to a charity. You can choose to leave it to another person in the family or a friend. Doesn't have to be a relative. Now, this type of trust could either be created now while you're alive, and you could put money into it now, get it started, or the other option is it can be written in and as part of your last will and testament, or written in your revocable trust agreement. So that means it's written now, however, it won't come into play until you pass away. And at that time, that's when assets that you own at your passing will actually go into the special needs trust. So you have a lot of choices. So why might somebody want to create a special needs trust for a child or a grandchild now while they're alive? Well, there are several good reasons. The first is there could be a tax advantage. Perhaps the relative has a lot of assets and they're trying to lower the assets or lower taxable assets. That might be one good reason that they would like to create and fund the special needs trust while they're alive. It might also be that they get joy from watching what that special needs trust can provide for their child or grandchild. It's not something that they don't get to see when they're gone. They actually get to watch and enjoy it now because they see the benefits that their loved one is receiving. For other people, it's more about preparing and creating that plan that's going to take over when they pass away. So it's more about planning for the inheritance at death. Now, there are different types of assets that can go into the special needs trust, regardless of whether it's created while you're alive or it's funded at your demise. For example, you can purchase life insurance and you can designate the beneficiary of the life insurance as the trustee of the special needs trust. You can do that with all kinds of bank accounts. Again, you can designate a beneficiary. You can do that with investment accounts. You can do it with United States savings bonds. You can do it with insurance products that are called annuities. There are certain assets that have more particular rules that we have to closely pay attention to. So if you have any kind of retirement plan, could be an individual retirement account, what we call an IRA, or perhaps a 401k plan through your employer, there are certain tax rules that we have to pay attention to in order for the special needs trust to qualify as what's called a designated beneficiary under the tax rules, so that any monies remaining in your IRA or 401k will be distributed to the special needs trust over a certain period of time, measured by the life expectancy of the trust beneficiary. That gets a little complicated, and that's beyond the scope of today's webinar, but something to be aware of, that yes, you can designate retirement benefits to be received by a special needs trust. So it's important that you work together with a team of professionals when you are creating a special needs trust. You want to work with a qualified elder law attorney. You want to work with your financial planner, as well as your accountant. Everybody plays an important role. For example, the role of the accountant is going to be either now or in the future to prepare tax returns for the trust, because the special needs trust is considered by IRS to be its own separate tax entity. So we need to obtain from IRS a tax identification number similar to our Social Security numbers. You want to work with your financial planner because they may have some very good ideas about what assets to designate to go into the special needs trust compared to assets you might want to specifically designate to go to other beneficiaries who are named in your will or your revocable trust. So keep in mind that a good comprehensive plan can benefit you and your family by involving all the necessary professionals. Now, the second type of special needs trust is one that is created by the person who has the disability, him or herself. Now, interesting, this is a federal law that was created almost 25 years ago that gave us the ability to create this type of special needs trust. And when the law was written, we didn't have the ability to allow the person with the disability to actually sign the trust agreement. So the only people that could sign the document was the beneficiary's parents if they were alive, a grandparent if a grandparent was living, and if we were in a situation where the client didn't have a living parent or a living grandparent, then we had two other choices. If the person was incapacitated and had a guardianship, we could have the guardian sign the special needs trust document, or we could go to court and we could ask a judge to be the person to create the special needs trust. Well, for many clients who had a physical disability, but cognitively they were fine, they were in no way affected cognitively or mentally, this was problematic because it was putting them in a position to have to expend money to go to court simply to create the trust. And for some clients, they didn't need a guardian. They weren't mentally incapacitated. So for years, we had a dilemma. And during that period of time, our only solution was to do a very limited guardianship just to create the special needs trust. And then once the trust was created, we terminated the guardianship in the court. But it really wasn't the answer we were looking for to help clients. So finally, about 2 years ago, Congress listened and they revised the law. And now, under the new federal law, the beneficiary with the disability or the special needs can be the one to create the special needs trust, as long as they are mentally competent. They can understand, they can reason, and they can appreciate the consequences of choosing to put their own assets into the special needs trust. So now this has helped so many more clients who unfortunately don't have a parent or a grandparent alive to create the trust for them. Now, we find that this type of special needs trust is mostly used by adult clients, but sometimes by children who are either receiving a settlement from a lawsuit. As you see in the photo, there's a woman of an older age in a wheelchair. Let's, just for purposes of this conversation, imagine that she was injured and now her lawsuit has settled and she's coming into several $100,000. But she doesn't want to lose her Medicaid benefits. So if she is under age 65, she can create the special needs trust for herself. And with this type of special needs trust, since the lawsuit proceeds really do belong to her, the law requires that the attorney include language in the document that says when she passes away, any monies remaining must first go to repay the state that provided her with the Medicaid assistance. Now, I think that this is very fair because number one, we know that Medicaid pays a reduced rate. And so it may be possible that the Medicaid lien could be less. It could also be more than the assets remaining. But we also know that there is no obligation of anybody else in the family to repay the Medicaid lien. So if this beneficiary has used up all the special needs trust assets and it gave her wonderful quality of life and quality of care, then there's nothing left to repay Medicaid and nobody else has an obligation to do that. Similarly, if there are monies left in her trust and the Medicaid lien is small, then once Medicaid is repaid, any remaining monies are going to go to a secondary beneficiary that she will have chosen. So it is possible that it could benefit other people after her passing. Now, another reason why we might choose to use this special needs trust is if an adult child is going to continue to receive child support past their 18th birthday. So we want that child to either obtain and qualify for or maintain government benefits, possibly SSI and Medicaid. But if the monthly child support is of a level that's going to cause them to lose the benefits, then we can direct that the child support be paid into the special needs trust, and under the rules, it won't count. So that adult child now is able to continue getting SSI and Medicaid. They're leveraging the government benefits, and they're getting quality of life and quality of care because of what services or products the special needs trust money can buy for them. And then the third kind of situation we would use this special needs trust for is an unanticipated inheritance. I'll give you an example. Several years ago, I had a young man and his mother come to consult with me. The young man was in his late 20s. He had a mental health disability, and at that time he was receiving monthly SSI benefits, and he received health insurance coverage through Florida Medicaid. His grandmother had recently passed away, and for whatever unknown reason was, she did not do proper planning to protect his share of the inheritance. And in her will, she had a very expensive piece of commercial real estate that she was leaving to 5 grandchildren, and my client was one of the 5 grandchildren. And so what we needed to do was to notify Social Security of the inheritance, but to explain that until the property was going to be sold, the client was actually not going to receive any money. So what Social Security agreed to do is they continued to provide him with benefits on a contingent basis, with the understanding that when the property was sold and he actually received his share, he would repay Social Security for the few months that they were continuing to pay him SSI benefits. So what we did is we created this type of special needs trust for him. He was under age 65, but at that time, we didn't have the benefit of the new law. So his mother created the trust for him, and then when the commercial real estate was sold, he took his share, he put it in the special needs trust, he immediately repaid Social Security for the few months that they continued to give him SSI benefits. We informed Social Security and provided them with all the documentation to show that the trust was properly written, and then he was able to continue for the future to get his SSI and his Medicaid. So that's an example of how it actually practically works to help people, whether they're under age 65 or if we have somebody who's over age 65, another type of special needs trust is called a pooled trust, P-O-O-L-E-D. And this we can use for people that are older than age 65. The difference is that instead of an attorney writing the trust already exists, and by law, it must be managed by a charity. It cannot be managed by a person. So the client cannot choose to have their parent or their sibling be the trustee. The trustee is actually a charity. But if they need help communicating with the charity, they can certainly designate a parent or a trusted person to be their advocate to communicate with the trustee. And all the same special needs trust rules that we're going to talk about today still apply to the pooled trust. So let's talk about what I like to call the 10 commandments of special needs trust, things that we must make sure are done by the trustee so that the beneficiary maintains their government assistance eligibility. The first of the 10 commandments is that the trustee should not distribute assets directly to the beneficiary. Now, why do you think that's the most important rule? The answer is because anytime we pass assets through the hands of somebody on these financially sensitive programs, they have to report it to the agency, and they can lose benefits that month or perhaps for a longer period of time, depending on the value of the asset they've received. So that leads us to the second of the 10 commandments, which is we want the trustee to distribute assets on behalf of the beneficiary to a vendor, meaning a third party that's going to provide our beneficiary with a service or a product. So the beneficiary can tell the trustee, I need a computer or I need something else, and they can actually, if they're capable, do the research and comparison shop, but the trustee will actually make the purchase and then make the payment directly to the vendor rather than putting the money into the hands of the beneficiary and expecting the beneficiary to pay the vendor. The third of the 10 commandments is also the next most important rule to follow, and this is called the sole benefit rule. And here's what it means. It means that when the trustee decides to make an expenditure, a distribution, it must be related for the sole benefit of the beneficiary. So I'm going to give you two types of very different examples. Let's say the beneficiary calls the trustee up and says, I would like you to write a check for $500 from my special needs trust to my sister for her birthday. It's a birthday present. Now, when the trustee looks at the request, the trustee is going to say that gift doesn't in any way benefit the trust beneficiary. So I cannot make that distribution to the sibling. However, here's a different example. Let's say the beneficiary calls up the trustee and says, you know, I haven't been on a vacation since I was injured, and now that my lawsuit has settled, I would really love to go to Disney. But because of my injuries, I'm going to need help. I can't do it alone. So I would like to take my mom and my dad with me because they help me get ready in the morning. They help me transfer to the wheelchair, and they're really my right hand. So the trustee is going to again evaluate, can I make this expenditure because it's for the sole benefit of the trust beneficiary? And here's what the trustee is going to evaluate. They're going to evaluate that yes, they can pay for the price of the admission for the beneficiary. They can pay the hotel room for the beneficiary. They can pay for food for the beneficiary. And because it's necessary that the parents go along because the beneficiary needs their assistance, the trustee can also pay for the same expenses for the parents. However, if the beneficiary says to the trustee, you know, I'd love to bring my grandparents too, it would make them so happy. That's the point at which the trustee may in their evaluation have to say, you know, we cannot pay for the grandparents. There's no direct benefit for the trust beneficiary, but we can pay for the parents who are the direct caregivers. So that's a little bit how a trustee goes through the evaluation process to make sure that what's being requested is for the sole benefit of the beneficiary. The fourth 10 commandment is that the trustee needs to keep good records. At any point in time, a government agency could choose to audit a special needs trust. That could be the Social Security Administration, or it could be the Medicaid agency. And they can contact the trustee and the beneficiary and request to see the records to make sure that how the money is being spent is truly for the sole benefit of the trust beneficiary. Now, related to the fourth of the 10 commandments is the fifth one, which is that the trustee is required each year to provide a trust accounting report to the beneficiary. And this report tells the beneficiary how the monies were being invested, what was purchased, how was the money being spent, was there a change in value? So for example, if some of the monies might be in a stock or a bond, the trustee is going to report if there was an increase or if there was a loss in that type of asset. And then at the end of the trust accounting, it will tell the beneficiary what money, what assets are remaining in the special needs trust. Now, the sixth of the 10 commandments is that the trustee needs to create what we call an expenditure plan so that the beneficiary lives within the means of the trust. And this needs to be done from the very beginning. If the beneficiary is making requests that the trustee acquiesces to, and they live beyond the financial health of the trust, then that special needs trust isn't going to last very long. So for example, if the beneficiary wants the trustee to buy the beneficiary a new home, the trustee has to determine how much should be spent on the home, because they are very likely also going to have to pay for modifications to accommodate the needs of the beneficiary. So we don't want to buy a house that costs too much, because not only is there the initial purchase, but there's the ongoing payments for homeowners insurance, real estate taxes. And so we want to make wise decisions as we work with the beneficiary and the trustee, because the goal here is to make the monies last as long as possible. The seventh of the 10 commandments is that the trustee can pay for what are called shelter expenses. Now, if the beneficiary receives SSI, which is a monthly cash benefit, there are strict rules about receiving cash or receiving payment such as free housing or free food. It has a value to it. So it's looked upon as if somebody is providing support to the trust beneficiary. Now, in Social Security land, getting something of value has just about equal value, so it's almost a dollar for dollar exchange. So shelter can include paying rent, paying a mortgage, paying utilities like electric, sewer, water, and garbage. And so if a special needs trust is used to pay shelter expenses, there will be a reduction that month in the trust beneficiary's SSI check, pretty much dollar for dollar. Now, it doesn't mean that if the mortgage costs $1,500 and the person is only getting $783 of SSI, it does not mean that they lose their entire SSI check that month. There's actually a math formula to determine what the reduction would be. But what we want to do is see, can we have the special needs trust beneficiary pay for certain shelter expenses using their SSI check, and then have the trustee use the special needs trust assets to pay for things that are not shelter expenses. So we want to try to leverage and reduce having to have the SSI check reduced. Now, there are certain shelter expenses that don't cause any type of reduction in the SSI benefit. And I'll share with you some examples. If the beneficiary needs to purchase a set of dishes, that's not going to cause a reduction. If they need to buy new appliances, that will not cause a reduction. If they need to make home repairs, or they're going to pay for somebody to cut the lawn, neither of those cause any kind of reduction in the SSI. Paying for telephone services does not cause a reduction, and putting on hurricane shutters, any kind of insulation for the home also does not cause a reduction in SSI. So we want to look and see what does the beneficiary need and how can we safely navigate around the SSI rules. Now, believe it or not, the trustee could pay for food. And you're probably saying to yourself, wait a second, Stephanie, 2 minutes ago you said that if the trust beneficiary receives food or money that they could use for food, they're going to get a reduced SSI benefit. Yes, I did say that. But again, we need to keep in mind that sometimes a reduction in SSI might be needed. It might be okay for 1 or 2 months because there's greater benefit to the SSI recipient by doing so. So yes, there are black and white rules, but we also want to look in between the gray areas to see how we can leverage and maximize working within the rules. The 9th of the 10 commandments is also a very important one, and it's one that most people are not comfortable talking about, but we're going to be brave today, and we're going to talk about why the trustee should purchase and actually pay in full for pre-need funeral arrangements for the trust beneficiary. The Social Security Administration has a very strange, there's no other way to say it, strange SSI rule that says at the death of an SSI recipient, the trustee cannot use the trust assets to pay for funeral arrangements until the Medicaid lien has been repaid. Now, this can take several weeks because we have to contact the Medicaid collection agency and inform them of the death of the trust beneficiary. They're going to go through their computer records and then tell us how much Medicaid assistance they paid. The trustee may need to look at the billing to make sure it's correct and nothing was charged that the trust beneficiary did not receive. So you see, it could take several weeks before the trustee is able to pay off the Medicaid lien and could then pay for funeral arrangements. So this can be a very emotionally upsetting time for family. And this is the reason why, especially when the beneficiary receives SSI, we want to make those arrangements while they're alive and we want to pay for them in full. So that way, nothing in the process is going to be held up when the trust beneficiary passes away. And then the 10th commandment, and very important one, is that the trustee can give the beneficiary what is called a True Link card. True Link is the name of a company based in California that came up with this idea several weeks ago to create a combination debit credit card that a trust beneficiary could use so that they have some independence. It has that ability to give them confidence and dignity that they're still being actively involved in their life to the extent that it is safe. And monies can be put on the TrueLink card that allow the trustee to limit the types of categories of expenditures as well as how much can be spent on expenditures. And the nice thing about the TrueLink card is that the trustee can get email reports whenever the card is used, plus they get a report at the end of each month to see what was purchased. So this is a great tool because it provides record keeping for the trustee. It gives the trust beneficiary independence and dignity, and then it allows us to stay within the confines of the SSI rules. So let's talk a little bit about just a few of the wonderful benefits that people get when they have a special needs trust. The first one is something that touches all of us, which is we want to have quality of life. So ask yourself that question, what does quality of life mean for your loved one? Is it that they get to go on a vacation? They get to travel? They get to see a family member that doesn't live in the same state? Or perhaps a relative is getting married and they have the opportunity to go to the wedding and participate and see all the family. You know, you can't put a price on that. What about quality of care? What is the type of care that you want your loved one to have? Does it mean hiring a private duty home health agency? Does it mean perhaps hiring a companion to take your loved one out into the community and do fun things, go to a movie, go to lunch, go shopping, go see a play? It might mean paying for medical treatment that is not covered by Medicaid because it's considered experimental. Or it might mean special equipment like a specialized wheelchair, and Medicaid is only going to pay for a wheelchair that it has approved. So the quality of life and quality of care can mean different things to different people. What about continuing to provide your loved one with education? Maybe they need a tutor, or perhaps their world will open up with a new computer and a printer and a scanner and somebody to teach them how to use it. And as we mentioned a little while ago, special needs trust assets can be used for housing expenses. So the possibilities are endless. What I want you to think about is you're being given a blank canvas, a bunch of different types of brushes, and an unlimited number of colors of paint. And you get to paint the picture that you envision. You get to paint that future. And it can look different for you than it can look for the next person. But it really should be tailored to what you want to achieve for your beneficiary. So you don't want to leave the writing of a special needs trust to just anyone, because this is something that should be tailored to you and your family. So it's very important that the attorney you're going to hire be proficient in the government benefit rules. These rules do not stay stagnant. They are forever changing and developing. So it's important that the attorney be in touch with how do you find out the changes in the government benefit rules? How do you read the rules? How do you request an opinion from the Social Security agency or the Medicaid agency? So proficiency is a really important skill. Number two, the attorney you hire needs to have experience with the federal special needs trust laws and how they change over time. When I represent an individual or a family, my services are not just about writing a trust, but it's going beyond that. It's including notifying the government agency that a special needs trust has been created, providing them with the document, providing them with proof of the assets going into the trust, and presenting the legal argument as to why this person continues to qualify for government benefits. And it's so important that whoever the trustee is, well, whether it's a family member, whether it's a professional corporate trustee, the attorney services should include training, ongoing guidance for the trustee, because we want the trustee to do their very best job to administer this trust so government benefits stay intact. So at this time, I would like to open up the dialogue. For any questions, you're welcome to unmute yourself, and you can either ask the question out loud, or we have a chat box. It'll appear in your upper right-hand corner. It looks like a speech bubble, and you're welcome to type a question, which I'll read out loud and provide the answer.
I have a question, Stephanie, and I'm going to try to phrase it so it sounds like I know what I'm talking about, but that's why I'm asking the question. You mentioned if someone receives an award, say for instance they were in a car accident and then they receive monies to compensate them for the incident, they would and they're receiving Medicaid or SSI, they won't have to exhaust those monies to pay back Medicaid or SSI, or there's something you mentioned about a Medicaid lien?
Correct, Lisa. So that lien has to be repaid at the death of the trust beneficiary.
Okay, at the death. Okay. So it's not a matter of them having to pay any monies back while they're alive, just at death.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that will apply no matter what the source of the funds are that go into the special needs trust. So it can be the lawsuit proceeds, it could be the child support, or it could be that unexpected inheritance. So when we have a beneficiary under age 65 who creates and signs their own special needs trust, we have to have that payback language in the document.
Okay, so it couldn't be a matter of the trustee making a document with an attorney such as yourself that in the event that the beneficiary passes away, those monies could then be given to someone else.
Right. If we write it that way and we ignore repaying Medicaid, when a copy of that trust is submitted to the government agency, they're going to disapprove it and they're going to cancel the benefits right away.
Gotcha. Okay. Wow, that was interesting. I did have another. You mentioned someone with a mental health issue.
Yes.
They have to have, would that beneficiary have to have written documentation from a physician indicating that their mental health issue is now a disability for them?
That's a really good question. So what we like to do when we're first getting to know the person who has the special needs is we want to look at their government benefit notices. Mm-hmm. And if they're receiving SSI or SSDI, they should be able to provide us with the very first letter in which Social Security did its evaluation and determined that the person had a qualifying disability.
Okay.
So, yeah, as long as we have that, then we can proceed.
Okay. I'm taking advantage of this time with you. Could someone with an addiction be considered having a disability?
So the Social Security rules are very well defined. There is a manual that goes into great detail that covers physical disabilities, developmental disabilities, mental health, cognitive. My experience with the Social Security agency is that they generally deny people with addictions.
Addiction, okay, I thought about that. Okay, and I have two young boys, young men, and I am trying desperately to raise them to be responsible citizens. Is there another kind of trust, or is it just a general will that I would develop if I wanted to have something similar to a special needs trust where I would have an expenditure plan and a true link card to issue to them upon my death?
So if your children are healthy and don't have any disabilities or special needs, you would not want a special needs trust, but there are other types of trusts that can be written where you can set certain ages at which they would receive portions of their inheritance, with the idea in mind that as they grow older, They
Mhm.
will have more life experience, they will make better choices, and they will be fiscally
Mhm.
responsible.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't have
So,
any more questions. That
all
was
right.
excellent. I so appreciate that. Thank you.
So I want to thank everybody who joined me today and just remind you that if you go to the website, www.fl-elderlaw.com, go to the events calendar page and you'll see all the upcoming webinars that you can register for. And if you missed a webinar or you'd like to listen to it again, you can go to our page for the webinars and you can register to listen to the recording. And don't forget to download the free document checklist to help you start preparing to do an estate plan, and we will be happy to provide you with a complimentary gift certificate for your initial consultation. So I wish everybody a wonderful, relaxing, and most of all, healthy weekend, and thank you for joining me.